Greetings, Tim Wyman here, Managing Partner at Center for Financial Planning. And today we're talking about the GM Voluntary Separation Program. And I couldn't be more happy to have two of my partners, colleagues, certified financial planning practitioners, Nick Defenthaler and Matt Trujillo. I'm really excited to have you guys on with us today because I know a lot of your work is done in this area that might be job or career transition planning, which is so important for folks, and it can be a little unnerving when you have to go through a program like this. So welcome, and I'm looking forward to our time together.
Yeah, thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Tim. So Nick, why don't we start out with you and maybe just give us an outline of what this voluntary separation program actually looks like.
Sure. So as many of you know, late last week, GM sent out this memo that you're seeing on the screen. Came to as a bit of a surprise. I believe it was sent out last Thursday. Gave folks a whopping close to 3 weeks to ultimately make a decision. But this is a voluntary separation offer. Okay. This offer ultimately went out to approximately 35,000 of GM's white collar employees. The goal is to ultimately have roughly 10,000 employees accept this offer in hopes of saving roughly $2 billion on the GM balance sheet. At a high level, those who have been with GM for more than 5 years are eligible for the voluntary separation offer that was extended last week. Ultimately, 1 month of pay for every year of service, up to 12 years of service. So if you've been with, bottom line, if you've been with GM for more than 12 years, you're receiving a maximum of 1 year severance, essentially.
So, Nick, I mean, we've had other auto makers, including GM, have these buyout offers, if you will, over the years. So this just isn't people who are looking to retire or at retirement age. This is basically anyone. Anyone, correct. Which,
okay. Like you said, Tim, I mean, seeing these many times over the years from Ford, Chrysler, GM, in some circumstances, they are more geared towards folks who are a couple years out from retirement. So I think it just highlights, the current state of the economy, some unknowns, and companies are really just trying to make sure they're as lean as they can.
So you mentioned the severance, I'll call it, up to 12 months of pay. Are there some other benefits, I assume, as well?
Correct. So GM is also offering kind of the same sort of formula, but a lump sum payment to help cover medical expenses.
Okay.
So that's something as well. There's some unique things with Cobra. If you do decide that actually makes the most sense to stay on, if you have a health savings account, you can actually use that sort of vehicle to pay premiums from Cobra. Not a lot of folks are aware of that unique rule. So that's kind of getting into more of the planning side of it. But at a high level, there were some additional aspects as well. Also a prorated Team GM target, for 2023 that would also be paid out as a lump sum. So
if I'm not going to lose my bonus, is that what they're basically saying?
Essentially, right?
Okay.
So there would be some proration tied to it, of course, but not fully lost.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Hey, Matt, I know you do a lot of speaking around this area for some local companies. And, maybe just talk a little bit about your experience in this area and what are some of the initial financial, issues or concerns that need to be addressed?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. This is certainly an area I've done a lot of work in, just people in transition in general. And the checklist is almost always the same, regardless of the company, whether we're talking GM or anyone else for that matter. A lot of times it can take you off guard and say, well, what does this mean for me? Should I accept the offer? Should I not accept the offer? And immediately the first thought is, well, how am I going to pay for my bills? So if I do accept the offer, 1 year's worth of severance, and then your mind starts racing. What if I don't have a job a year from now? What if I can't make the same money that I've become accustomed to?
Right.
What have I accumulated enough to retire? Do I even need to look for a job, or do I need to look for a job that pays as much? Maybe I can scale back. Maybe I can work part-time. So all these thoughts tend to race through someone's mind when they're confronted with this type of offer. And that's the type of work that I do for folks, is help guide them through that, help put some order to the chaos that might be going on in their life.
Yeah, I just imagine that many of us probably underappreciate the significance of a transition, a career or a job transition can have. I mean, imagining that you're with a company for 10, 15, 20 years, this can be a challenging time.
Yeah, it can be a big shakeup in someone's life. Financial concerns aside, just psychologically, it tends to have an impact on you. So there's a lot to work through as we go through these things together. And I think helping to reassure someone, if it is in fact the case that financially at least they're going to be okay, I think can go a long way to giving some peace of mind.
So what are some of the first, areas to address? I'm wondering, is it health insurance, 401k, lump sum pension distributions? Where do you start?
Yeah, good question. I think all of that is potentially on the table. Usually the cash flow is probably a good place to start. What do you need monthly in order to make ends meet? Because you're going to have potentially 1 year's worth of severance, but what does that mean? What does it mean how about year two? How do you pay the bills in year two and going forward? So I think cash flow is a good starting point. But again, just going back to trying to put some order around the chaos, there's going to be many decisions that need to be made. And in this instance, it's going to need to be made in a fairly short amount of time. So prioritizing decision-making is very important in terms of this is an urgent issue. We need to address it in the next week or two. And then there's other things, yes, this is very important, but we don't need to make a decision on this until August, let's say. So we can kick that can down the road for a month or so and, allow my team and myself more time to really look at the data and understand how this fits into the overall plan. But any and all of the above, the 401k, the pension, the cash flow, the healthcare, do I need to go back to work or not? How much do I need to make in order to make ends meet? And, if there's
life insurance, portability, right?
You got it. Yeah. Life insurance. Some companies offer portable disability insurance or portable long-term care insurance. So there's a lot that needs to go into this decision-making process, and it can really feel overwhelming, especially in this instance, I'll say, when people really feel like they're under the gun to make a decision quickly, it can really lead to panic.
Yeah, as you were talking, Matt, I was thinking, the center's been around since 1985 in Metro Detroit. So clearly we've seen a lot of these programs with the automakers over the years. And I think one of the best constructs I can suggest to folks has been, as you mentioned, kind of putting together that now, soon, and later for decision making, because there's probably 101 decisions that ultimately need to be made. But if we put them in a now, soon, later category, it frees our mind to maybe focus on what's most important immediately. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hey, Nick, I know you do a lot in the area of retirement income planning and especially tax efficient retirement planning.
Correct.
And I know you've done a lot of pension analysis, lump sum versus monthly. What's your current thoughts in that area right now?
Right. So the game has really changed, over the last 12 to 15 months, I should say. The Federal Reserve aggressively, as many of us know, raised interest rates last year and are continuing to do so. And the interesting thing is, with a pension, when interest rates go up, the value of your lump sum goes down. There really isn't any impact to that monthly income stream that you could ultimately see when you're in retirement and collecting that pension. But I think back even in September of last year, Ford Motor Company actually sent out a letter to the majority of their employees. I believe it was sometime in August, because what Ford does in September is they do this annual valuation of the pension plan. And they take a look at the current interest rate environment in that letter. And I don't know if you gentlemen chime in, let me know if you've ever seen anything like this before, but I personally haven't in my over 15 years of experience, but basically stating in that letter, hey, just a heads up, if you don't take this pension in the next 30 to 60 days, your lump sum is going to go down by 20-25%. And like I said, I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. So the game has kind of changed, coming off the last 10, 12 years in a historically low interest rate environment where, that lump sum payment in many cases was very attractive. Now, obviously, everyone's situation is a little bit unique, their appetite for risk, et cetera. But in today's world, that monthly income stream compared to the pension lump sum has become far more attractive than it was maybe a year ago. And as Matt mentioned, and I failed to mention this up front, kind of given the summary, the deadline to make the decision is noon Friday, March 24th. So you don't have a lot of time to make some of these decisions. Now, you don't have to make that decision with your pension, obviously, when you're deciding to whether or not you want to take GM up on this offer that, hopefully ultimately does get accepted. It's not a guarantee that even though you submit or file to be considered for this, that you will ultimately be accepted. More than likely you will, but you do have some time to make some decisions on the pension. But the environment has certainly changed quite a bit in that space.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Like you said, the last year, Ford Motor as the example. I know Matt worked with several clients, as did I, and you're absolutely right. And it's counterintuitive that somehow when rates go up, the value of the lump sum goes down.
Right.
And that's how the math works, folks. So yes, rates have gone up, value of the lump sum's gone down. So maybe for a lot of folks, the monthly pension might look a lot more attractive, even though every financial planner in the world would say take the lump sum so they can manage the money, right? So it may or may not be appropriate. So make sure you do the math.
Yeah. One final point on that one, Tim, if you don't mind. I think one of the unique things that we do as a firm is we will plug into a client's financial plan. What does it look like if the client takes a lump sum? How does that impact how much they want to spend in retirement, or the proverbial probability of success when we're updating their financial plan? And we have one scenario that we take a look at with the lump sum, the other with the monthly income stream. And sometimes they're very similar. And we say, honestly, you really can't make a bad decision on this, but we like to model it out and try to take the emotion out of the decision, really just look at it from a mathematical standpoint. And then you also bring in that human element. And I think that's kind of what makes what we do somewhat of an art form of combining the mathematical side of your financial plan with the behavioral side.
Interesting. Matt, what was some of your experience as you were looking at lump sums? And you're on mute.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Are you asking specifically as it related to the Ford and what we've seen recently in terms of the markdowns?
Yeah, I mean, that as well as Nick made a good point, and I would characterize it, financial planning in these decisions isn't always about dollars and cents. There's a behavioral component. So sometimes you can run the numbers and, you might say the lump sum looks better, but for that client, the security of a monthly payment might make more sense. Have any guidance for folks on how they might make the decision?
Well, some things to think about, and pensions for the most part, they're not as prevalent as they used to be, and I think oftentimes people can take that for granted that hey, if you really run the math and you see how much money you would have had to save on your own regard in order to replicate this, it's a significant dollar amount, especially with people living a long time. So what I like to do is, certainly someone's appetite for risk plays a role in the decision making. If they're more conservative, they might prefer more fixed guaranteed income coming into the household. But you have to look at, what if they're married, what did your spouse do? Do they have a pension? You have to look at the Social Security. Do they have any annuities where they plan on turning on any income from that? Maybe they own rental properties. So there's a lot that goes into it, where you look at the income and how much of their needs are met. As a general rule of thumb, I usually like to target around 50%. So if someone says, hey, Matt, I'm going to need $10,000 a month after taxes in order to feel comfortable in retirement, I might target about 5,000 of that coming from fixed guaranteed sources of income like Social Security, annuities, or pensions. So that's kind of a starting point for me. Other things to think about: longevity. That's going to play a role. If someone is not in great health, I tend to lean more towards lump sum than pension income. Specifically as it relates to the Ford, I was hearing a lot of things as I was meeting with new potential clients. Matt, this markdown is so significant. I feel like I'm going to be working at Ford for free for the next few years.
Right.
So
that's how, yeah, when you're talking about 20 to 23% difference in lump sum amounts, that certainly was it. Well, that makes a lot of sense. And what I took away from both of you was, when it's not an isolated decision either. Like, your other income sources impact what might make the most sense. And I know you guys have done a lot of detailed analysis that have helped a lot of clients out. Maybe before I ask you guys for some final comments, the other item that a lot of people will have to decide is, what do I do with my 401k plan? Mm-hmm. And there's some different options that folks have when they separate from employment. Nick, what are some of the things that come to mind for you?
Right. No, it's a great point, Tim. Maybe what I could do real quick is just touch on a few concepts or strategies that I think people should be thinking of leading if they ultimately do decide to take GM up on this offer. Some considerations that they might have from now until that point, and then maybe Matt, you can speak on some options post separation if folks ultimately choose that route. So I actually had a detailed conversation with several clients yesterday regarding the offer. Both have strong income sources, and one of the top things that we want to make sure that we're doing is fully maximizing the 401k plan before they ultimately separate from service, right? So each individual who I talked to yesterday had over 12 years of service. So GM states in their memo that folks will ultimately no longer be with GM. The latest that they would ultimately separate from service would be the end of June. So it's possible that you have 18 months of just base salary in 1 year. Okay, so when we're thinking about anything related to retirement income or tax planning, and this is where that coordination with your investment plan and all these other pieces in your financial plan kind of come into play. Let's take a look at this year, because this could feasibly be one of the last years that you're in this very elevated tax bracket. Okay, so maximizing that pre-tax component for these two individuals made total sense. And then ultimately, if GM does allow to put some money in the 401k from the bonus or things of that nature, there could be an opportunity to even move even more money over to the after-tax component of the GM 401k plan and roll that out to a Roth. One of the clients who I had the conversation with yesterday, very charitably inclined. So we know that her income is going to be significantly higher in 2023. So we're going to do some large charitable gifts to really maximize and kind of front load her charitable giving to ultimately take advantage of that high bracket that she's going to be in, because moving forward, that tax bracket is going to decline.
So just putting numbers on it, I mean, maybe this year, because of the higher income, someone might be in the 32% marginal bracket, whereas in the future retirement, they're in the 22 or even 12%. So we want to take advantage of this year in that higher bracket.
Exactly. We like to call that a tax arbitrage opportunity, basically like the differential between, the fancy way of saying the differential between the two, and just be very prudent and not just look at the current year, but what's the rest of your life? That's hard to predict, obviously, the next 20, 30, 40 years maybe, but at least the next 5 to 10 years, and say, is there an opportunity to get this deduction at a meaningful high rate, and then ultimately take the money out in a few years at a much lower rate. So exactly what you said.
Great. Yeah, great advice. And I think all of our planners really do a good job at not looking at an isolation of 1 year, because sometimes you can save taxes in 1 year and then you look at over 5 and you've really frustrated and you're paying significantly more in years 4 through 5, right?
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. What else is on your mind?
I'll hand it over to Matt. Matt, do you want to comment on a few things related to 401k plans post-separation?
Yeah, the 401k can be another big decision that oftentimes is on folks' mind, and it's going to certainly play a role in their long-term retirement income planning. Things that you should know. Oftentimes, you meet with a professional. It can be somewhat self-serving. Of, hey, you're separated from service, you need to immediately roll it over. But that's not necessarily the case, and you should think it through and make a well-rounded decision. Because there are other options. Certainly rolling it over to an individual retirement account, an IRA, is one option. You could also leave it in the plan. So, you look at your mix and say, I think I have a suitable portfolio. I'm going to leave it in the plan. And there's actually some planning opportunities where it would make sense to do that. If you're over the age of 55 and you have 5 years or more of service, by leaving it in the plan, if you're planning on taking distributions from the 401k, you can do that penalty free. Whereas if you roll it to an IRA and you happen to be in that age group of, let's say, 55 to 60 years old, you actually would be subject to penalties by moving it to an IRA. Whereas in the 401k, you would avoid that. So I think
it's a little known secret of how to avoid 10% penalty.
Yeah.
Right. That doesn't come into play all the time, but in in our experience, right, in the cases where it's important, the ramifications would be huge if they would have rolled it to an IRA.
Yeah. You're talking a lot of potential wasted money, and no do-overs. Once you move it to an IRA, that decision's done and over with. So something you want to think about beforehand. But I would say simply, moving it to an IRA is an option. Keeping it in the 401k plan is another option. If you plan on becoming gainfully employed again and they offer a 401k, you can transfer it from one 401k to the other 401k. So really 3 things to think about. 3 main ones, I'll say. There's other ancillary things like Roth conversions and whatnot. If you have after-tax money in the GM plan, that could make sense to carve out and move to a Roth. So there's a lot that even goes into that decision alone. But I would say those are the 3 big ones when you're trying to think through that decision.
So, as we conclude, it sounds like in a very short period of time, there's a lot of planning that folks are going to need to do. As planning nerds, we really enjoy this work, right? But there is a lot, from potential pension elections, 401k, healthcare, life insurance, making sure that I'm fully funding my 401k this year. I would just suggest that, for our history here at the center, we have a lot of experience in this area. Nick and Matt certainly have shared a lot of planning items. So if our firm can be of help to you, please feel free to reach out. We'd love to help you gain some clarity around a very important decision. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim.